Persistent service asset, the REDEEMR Plus Dependent Dividend Ledger. A new corporate NOR dossier. First excerpts coming soon.
Listen via Persistent Service Asset, the REDEEMR Plus Dependent Dividend Ledger. July 2nd, 2026. By Pirate First for MXTM's newsletter. REDEEMR Plus Lifecycle Stack. Founding rationale. Archival copy distribution. Restricted // origin unconfirmed == Because no one should be a burden. Not even the ones you love. 2 clauses. 1 stack. Every liability finds its account eventually.
Dossier.
That was never really in question.
First excerpts
the only
coming
open
soon.
question was what gets classified as a liability and what gets classified as recoverable. REDEEMR Plus didn't invent that question. It just finished answering it. There are 2 doors into the stack. The intake officers will tell you they lead to the same room, and for once, the intake officers are telling the truth. The kin yield clause processes the ones who arrive broken, trisomy, severe congenital divergence, the cognitively dependent a family raised for 20, 30, 40 years and could no longer carry. The service debt clause processes the ones who broke themselves or were broken for them, a decade of street-grade stimulants, a traumatic injury that never fully resolved, the slow erosion of a mind that used to run a household, a business, a life. REDEEMR Plus S actuarial tables don't distinguish between the two. This ledger doesn't either. The origin of the damage stopped matching the moment somebody worked out how to price it. What the stack acquires is never a corpse. Termination wastes perfectly good motor function. What it acquires is a body with the parts that used to argue, hesitate, remember, and refuse, quietly sealed off in the language of the brochure, while everything that still walks, lifts, smiles, and says welcome stays fully operational. The industry has a term for what's left. Not a patient, not a person, a persistent service asset. It does not go home. This ledger follows the paperwork through intake lounges built to feel like day spas, conversion clinics that smell like rubbing alcohol and synthetic copal, hospitality corridors staffed by people whose civil status was revoked the moment a thumbprint cleared a terminal, compliance interviews, procurement records, and the testimony of the people who built the system and then, one by one, stopped answering calls. It doesn't ask you to feel a particular way about any of it. The ledger never does. It just closes. Contents. Intake assets acquired. 2 doors, 1 room, 2 clauses, 2 marketing pathways, 1 identical intake architecture. Why REDEEMR Plus S actuaries kept the language of born broken and went broken administratively separate long after the underlying process became indistinguishable, and what that separation was actually for. The cost of free will, the FI 2038 directive that deprecated therapeutic rehabilitation as a funding category. A training seminar, an internal memo, and the regional supervisor who said the quiet part out loud. The damage was the only part worth saving. The kin yield clause, inside the Tulum Asset Stabilization Hub. A family, a decade of compounding debt, a ledger that zeroes out in 3 milliseconds, and a glass drive that holds everything they're told they'll need. 2. Conversion cost of goods. Subcortical stabilization, the surgical specification sheet. The OmniMesh link, the thermal microlesions that seal rather than repair, and the precise inventory of what conversion preserves against what it retires. Authorized edges, how local first firmware guarantees that whatever is still happening underneath never reaches the hands or the mouth. A technical chapter on deterministic behavior as a product feature, and on what awake comes to mean once nothing awake is in control. Civilly deceased, the regulatory amendment that makes the rest of it legal. A certificate of structural liquidation. A body with no civil status left for anyone to violate. 3. Deployment, revenue generation. The hospitality corridor, concierge desks, room service, night security, and the rest of the staffing categories the founding documents list without apparent embarrassment. Record guest satisfaction scores and what they're actually measuring. Divergent heuristics, inside the cenote red vaults. Tics, reflexes, involuntary motor noise, harvested as the one thing a clean dataset can't fake. The texture that makes synthetic empathy sound human. The recharge bay, what a 12-hour shift ends in. Not a home, a climate-controlled pod, stacked beneath the hotel with several hundred others. Street name, the long dead. 4. Amortization depreciation schedule. The legacy simulation clone the premium package families take home instead. A sanitized avatar built from the original's voice and face, purged of the tremor, the repetition, and the years that made the original hard to love. Depreciation curve, what happens after the firmware ages, the implant needs servicing the stack no longer budgets for, or a body simply outlives its projected labor window. Assets retire quietly. There's a protocol for that too. Phantom sensations, the side effects nobody put in the brochure. Recurring dreams reported by families years after transfer. A face behind a mask. An urge to whisper to an empty room. V. Reconciliation audit trail. The compliance architect, testimony given to investigators shortly before the witness stopped answering calls. Healthy people ask questions. The stack wanted brains damaged just enough to obey, and intact enough to smile. Procurement records, what survives when the witnesses don't. An unredacted trail of contracts, shell subsidiaries, and hospitality industry press releases that add up to something none of the individual documents were written to say. The backlash cycle, how Eugenesis trademark it, became a headline REDEEMR Plus' communications office had been ready for since the prior fiscal quarter, and what the company did with the accusation instead of denying it. 6. Closing balance. One revision at a time, long before chains were called contracts and company towns were called opportunity, someone signed a document that felt at the time like the reasonable option. A closing account of how a civilization gets from there to a customer service badge. Thanks for reading MXTM's newsletter. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and support my work.
Why atone when you can architect?
The REDEEMR Pro protocol allows for real-time visualization of the data matrix directly through the Smart Paper interface, streamlining analysis.
The map beneath the map: why the future is always built by pirates.
In the ruins of the old world, we built our own. Sun-powered, self-sustained, and free.